good afternoon or evening. What time is it there?
Good evening, Kendra, and good morning for you. It's
Yes,
actually it's 8 p.m. for me now.
8
8
p.m. and it is
15 minutes past. So
right. It is 7:15 a.m. here. So you're across the world. This is Rajesh. And Raj, how do you say your last name?
Dylan, like
Dylan,
Bob Dylan.
like Bob Dylan. This is
Yeah.
Rajesh Dylan, and he goes by Raj, and he's one of my favorite people in KM to talk to. And he has lots and lots of knowledge and experience, and he's basically going to talk to us about strategic KM today, but he's got a lot of other things to share as well. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So with that, I'm going to just ask you to start by doing your own biography, because sometimes that'll lead into some of the other stuff that you want to talk about. So go tell us where you started all this, about your
Thank
background.
you so much, Kendra, and I'd like to start by saying thank you for giving me this opportunity to reach out to students, and it's a bunch of people that I'm very passionate about, regardless of age. I myself was a very late student. I only took my bachelor's at age 35. After serving a couple of years in the Navy. And I took my master's only at the age of 37 or 38. No, 38. So I'm really what you call a very late student, you know. But in today's world, it's all about continuous learning and lifelong learning. So I guess I've just hit 49. I hope it's the halfway mark, which means I've still got about a couple of years to go learning.
You.
And the beauty of being with students is that you learn every day with them. I learn more from students than I have learned from textbooks. And this is the story of me, right? So I started out being a very young naval officer. I joined the Navy at a very young age. I think I was 25, 26. And was I? No, I was 24. I was 24. Wow. I was 24 when I joined the Navy, and I served the Navy for 22 years.
Wow.
So I've finished a couple of tours in command. I've been to the Gulf twice. I've served with the US. I was with the US NAVCENT, the Fifth Fleet, and we
Okay.
were stationed in Bahrain in Ops Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. I
Wow.
did two tours with them, of course, with the Singapore Navy. But this was where I learned a lot of things, especially my experience being in the Navy and working in a multinational environment. The thing that really I took away was understanding culture.
Mhm.
And in KM, culture is almost everything. Yeah. Um, well, post Navy, I kind of did a couple of years in the corporate. I was with the American Insurance Association Agency, AIA.
Mhm.
Of course, they are based in Hong Kong now, and I did a bit of knowledge transfer there. We did business development, and I was the head of strategy there. Now, while this was going on, I started teaching. And I teach in two universities in Singapore. I teach in the Singapore University of Social Science, where I do info management. And I teach in the Nanyang Technological University, where I do knowledge management strategy, which is something which is more passionate. I'm Alpha. I was both of them are my previous schools. Both of them were my previous courses, which kind of gives a hint of I did pretty well for them to call me back. I was pretty okay, but but school was fun, and school still is fun, and teaching has been something that I'm very passionate about. So KM work started very young in the Navy, from the ground, and that's what I guess makes me a bit different. My KM thoughts have always been from the ground up, from the practitioner's perspective, and that's where I did my thesis on understanding lesson learned, and how we can actually improve using the appropriate lesson learns. So that's how I started my KM journey. And in Singapore, and to all of you there, I haven't given you a warm welcome from Singapore. It's warm 365 days a year here. So if you want to have summer throughout, come over. And my involvement in KM started with the Knowledge Management Society, and I've been there for 10 years now. I'm currently the president of the society, and we are also the founding member of the KM Global Network, and that's a network of now I think 26 countries, of like-minded non-profit societies that come together and you know create events and create conferences. If you want to come to Bali, let me know. It's in October. It'll be good. Kendra, I'll see you there, I hope. And that's what I do. So that's me, Kendra.
That's great. That's really good. So I didn't realize that you had spent that many years in the Navy. And how did you get interested in KM in the Navy? What was going on in the Navy that got your interest?
It was a lot of hard lessons. We were in the school of hard knocks. So I guess in the Navy, somewhere in the early I would say in about 2005, we started getting the KM Who's Who, right? We had Nancy Dixon come in. At that time, she had just finished a book called CompanyCommander.com. And I've read that book page to page. I was a young lieutenant at the time, and there was so much to learn from there. And the Navy, or the entire Singapore Armed Forces, had actually come up with a phase that they wanted every officer to have KM training, to understand how to learn, to understand how to do AARs, and actually to keep improving. So this continuous improving process was embedded into us, and from there, I guess it kind of knocked into us that we have to do a little bit of huddle every time before we start. Don't worry to be able to call a timeout and do a during action review, and then go ahead and do the after action review. And that's how I fell in love with lesson learned and the entire AAR process. So one of the books at that point of time that was very close to me was Learning to Fly, and that's where we picked up the entire thing of.
It's on my bookshelf right here. Yeah.
There you go. Just to give perspective to students, when you bought that book, it actually came with a CD behind. And I don't think it's valid anymore. Maybe today it's online, but when you first bought it, it actually came with a little CD on the back.
I have
You
it.
have it?
I have
There
it.
you go. There you go. Now, what we have just demonstrated is this concept called SPOT, the single point of truth. And me saying something and Kendra showing you the physical book, we've just crisscrossed it to tell you that, all right, this guy's not kidding. The book's that old and he's that old.
That's right. That's right.
So
Right.
that started my journey into KM. Yep. And of course, from there it started into figuring out how do we do this. And when we moved, as I grew up the ranks in the Navy, that's where you had to start to think about, okay, we need a strategy. If we are going to plan something, we need to strategize how we're going to learn from it first. So it's very much of coming to think of what are the key deliverables from each mission that you have to do, or each exercise that you do. What are the key takeaways that you want to create the environment for? What's the learning outcomes that you want? So it wasn't really a lesson plan, but it was more like, let's set our objectives right, and we have to achieve A, B, C, D. Did we get it? If we did, how did you do it? Is there a better way of doing it? If you didn't, what were the challenges that you faced? How can we improve? So it wasn't like KM, you have to do KM,
Right.
or you have to manage the knowledge, but it was in the little things that we do every day. And I see this in today's world as well. When I left the service and I started going into the private sector, it's the same thing. I remember when I was in a financial agency, and I'll say the boss, he kind of knew that I was the KM guy. And when I spoke to him and I said, hey, you know what? This thing that we're doing, it's actually a piece of how we manage knowledge. And his immediate reaction was, Raj, come on. I know you're passionate about KM. Don't talk to me about KM. We are just going to do what we do. And then I took a step back and I went, dude, but you are doing KM. That's all I'm telling you.
Yeah.
I didn't say it out loud, but from that day, I didn't mention KM anymore. I just said, hey, you know what? We got to continue doing sharings. We got to continue doing reflections. We got to capture this. Do we want to start a mentoring program? When people are leaving, do we want to have some form of exit interview so we can capture things from them? Now, all these are pieces like knowledge transfer. It's about knowledge sharing. It's things that we know in the KM society. But out there in the world where KM is not so well known, or rather, I would say today KM has already been embedded in everybody's job. And so they don't really have a word for it. But so it's okay. Let's just think of us having a strategy of how we're going to capture it if that's in our job description. And that's how strategy started for me. Very, very untextbook, if there's such a word, but it was very much from the ground, from the dirt in your fingernails, if I can use that term, and getting down and dirty and getting it all accumulated, and then, building up a report and saying, hey, this is how we did. This is our improvement.
It sounds to me like what you're describing is you have your strategy organized and planned, and the execution of it really requires flexibility. Would you say that's true?
I'll say you're spot on, Kendra. It's all about flexibility. You see, there is no way that knowledge managers out there are able to shove something down somebody else's throat. And that's because in a business, what they want to hear is how we're going to make more money, right? So we can talk about knowledge management as much as we can talk about let's improve productivity, let's improve efficiency, and let's improve effectiveness. And with these three keywords, we'll be able to bring in more business, do much more. And you know what? We will try to make sure that we have a happy bunch of people. And if we can achieve these three, you're going to be the best place to work. So that's how I see it, and that's how I translate knowledge management to some organizations that I have been with.
Mm-hmm. So that sort of forms the basis of your strategy, improve your efficiency, effectiveness, and productivity.
That's right.